Thanks for joining us. I'm Dr Sharon, and this is Voices of the Cliff, Program 4. In this second and final part of my interview with Dr. Sharon Lamm-Hartman, we deepen our understanding on how being centered helps leaders and other social change agents to be of service to the world around them, while at the same time following their passion.
It's so much easier to be in the present when you are really knowing more about who you truly are and what you stand for. Because it helps you to know, okay, am I going to go to bat for this? Is this one of the things I'm really going to speak up on? Is this something that I'll let go? And obviously these things shift and change as we grow and change, but it does help us to have a center point. What centers us, what grounds us, and I think at a certain stage of development, it's just simply knowing that your main motivation is to be of service in the way that you're uniquely designed to be, and the way to do that is to be completely present.
For more than 20 years, Sharon has coached hundreds of executives through inside-out learning at a long list of Fortune 100 corporations. Sharon has received awards from the Academy of Human Resource Development and the Center of Creative Leadership, and has been recognized for her work in Oprah's O magazine. In part one of the interview, Sharon discussed the transformative work she is doing with corporate teams. Part two broadens that discussion with a focus on bringing that learning to the world around us. We start part two with a question about what learning we might find as leaders in public tragedies such as 9/11. You were living in Manhattan during the 9/11 tragedy, and you were living 2 hours outside of Tucson in the recent shooting there. And
Right.
Is there any specific learning that as leaders or even individuals you think that we can take away from those traumatic public events?
Yes, I do. I actually was living in Philadelphia during 9/11, so not right in the city, but I was frequently on trains going into the city and out of the city, and working there quite a bit. And I feel these type of events, as tragic as they are, they end up bringing unity and opening people's hearts to our humanity, and to help people have each other's backs. The way we saw our country come together from 9/11, and the increase in love and having each other's backs. The firemen, the communities, and in the shooting as well in Tucson, really seeing the city come together as a community. And I think when we experience traumatic events like this, you can't help but have it be eye-opening. It makes you really do some soul searching inside to know how fragile life is, to know that, wow, one day we might be going to work, and the next day there's a tragic event, and our loved one isn't here anymore. And it really makes people go inside and do some soul searching and saying, am I in the right profession? What's really important to me in life? How do I define success, and am I there? Do I have my priorities right? I think it really causes a lot of these questions, and also brings us together in unity. Is really what I've noticed, from being 2 hours from both of these events that have happened.
Those events are triggering events for the public.
Absolutely.
The learning that comes out of that, the recognition that anything can change in a second, how do we make that stick at the public level?
It's a really, really good question, because I see it happen, and this happened with 9/11 too, right? Where it's like the country started to come together, and the New York City community did. They had so much support, but over time it kind of withered, didn't it?
Right.
So it's like, how do you have something stick? In a company, when you're dealing with a team or an organizational change, you keep coming back to it for a while until it becomes a habit. Whereas at the public level, we don't have systems set up for that, do we?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, in other countries where they have traumatic events like this on a more regular basis, I think it just becomes, I remember in my dissertation with India, when leaders would go to India and they had maybe never been out of the United States, and they went to India and they would see such poverty in our definition of poverty, right? But they would see these happy people, and they had so little and yet were so happy, and they knew what was so important to them were their families. And it would literally shake, these leaders up, just being in the culture and seeing that, okay, what really is important in life. And I think, when countries experience these kind of events on an ongoing basis, it becomes part of their fabric, and they may rely more on one another. So it's a great question for dialogue, I think, that you're onto. How do we take this to a world level? How do we take this to a public community level or a country level?
Perhaps as individuals, we can make the change as much as we can on our own.
There's a guy by the name of Greg Braden. He's looking at energetically what it's going to take to transform a collective consciousness. And I forget the number of people he said, but it's pretty small. It was like 8 or 10,000. And again, I am not quoting, I'm just quoting from memory of a presentation I heard a few years ago, that, if 8 or 10,000 people were at a certain consciousness level, it would help to shift the rest of the world. And it was quite interesting. He studied science and energy, and very interesting, and that being the change you want to see in the world, how many people does it take? And I've been around leaders whose presence transforms people. When you're around the Dalai Lama, you get changed just by being around him because of the peace he has inside of himself. It's an interesting time to be alive, and I feel that everything kind of starts with us. We first have to be that, and really be dedicated to being it. But so often being around someone who is it helps us to be it. So it's a great question for future dialogue, I think.
Sure. I wonder also, what can we do on just a daily basis as individuals to help us do that reflective work that can bring us to be those social change agents?
Boy, that's a good question. On a daily basis, I always start with a prayer. I call it a prayer, but for people who, aren't into prayer, you could call it an intention for the day. And I always say, how can I be of greatest service today? So show me how I can be of greatest service today. And sometimes it's not in the way that I think. I think, I'm going to get this done and this done and this done, and I have all these plans, and then, my puppy gets sick, or, and I have to go be of service in that way. Mm-hmm. So it's really, the more that we are facing uncertainty and ambiguity, I think that's a trend I'm really seeing in my coaching practice. It's causing a lot of stress for people. And so it's how can we just be present in the moment, and really trust that we are being of service in the way that a higher power is wanting us to be of service that day. So it's interesting. So I think anything you can do, practices that help you in the present moment, to be in the present moment, is really important, whether it's meditation or prayer, or a lot of people just exercise, running outside, hiking outside, or even there's a wonderful woman who we do work together, and her name is Faye Mandel. She has a book out called Self-Powerment. You might want to interview her, Douglas, at one time. She has a model for how to be in the present moment. And it's great for us left brain people who love quadrants and graphs. And, so she says, okay, if you're going into the future and you're in fear, then you've piggybacked a feeling onto a thought, and you have to come back to the present and make a different choice. Or you have to close down an experience if you're feeling sadness, or so she takes you through this, and it's a model, and the quadrants are time and space. It's a brilliant model that's really helping to transform, to do powerful transformative work to help people be present in the moment. And I think that's the most important thing we can do, to learn to really trust ourselves and to trust the actions that we take and to make the most informed decisions. Is we're not going to do it when we're regretting the past or out in the future, thinking something's going to happen. It's when we're right here and now.
You can find Sharon's contact information along with additional links about her work at our website, voicesofthecliff.com, where you can also listen to part 1 of this interview, as well leave comments and learn more about the composer of the theme music, Brad Rebuchin. I'm Douglas Scher, and I welcome you to listen to the next edition of Voices of the Cliff, which will be available next month.